Just a quick introduction. My name is Kelly Davila. I'm the Director of Caprock Business Finance Corporation.
My name is Naomi Couture, and I'm the Loan Program Coordinator here for SPAG and Caprock.
Great. We have two very important topics of interest for you this morning that we want to go over. First and foremost is our SPAG CORE program, which is our COVID relief program. We're going to go through the highlights of that program and how it works. And then Naomi's going to provide us with a quick overview of 504 and some important program updates that have recently come out. Let me tell you a little bit just kind of about our local team. Some of you lenders who have worked in 504 before are very familiar with Caprock BFC. We're a certified development company. We basically offer SBA 504 financing throughout the entire state of Texas. What you may be less familiar with is our collaboration with the South Plains Association of Governments. We're one office, the same people, but we offer different lending programs that fall under SPAG. So our SBA 504 program, like I said, is throughout the entire state of Texas. Naomi's going to cover that. And then for SPAG CORE, you can see on the map, we are allowed to operate that COVID relief program in specific counties in the Panhandle, South Plains region, and Permian Basin. And I'll get into that in just a second. So SPAG CORE is our COVID relief loan program. We developed this program in the fall with the assistance of the the Economic Development Administration, part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. And we were able to build this program from the ground up. It's a local financing program specifically for COVID relief. A little bit about the eligibility requirements for CORE. The fund was created, as I mentioned, specifically for small businesses located in the SPAG region, the Panhandle region, and the Permian Basin regions of Texas. You can see on the map, the red counties are where CORE is eligible. And we're looking for businesses who've had an impact by COVID-19. That doesn't have to be anything specific. Obviously, we all know restaurants were completely shut down for a period of time. But every business and industry has been impacted in some way by COVID-19. We also have a few other eligibility requirements for CORE. The small business must be at least 2 years old. The easiest way for us to document that is via tax returns or entity docs. They have to have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, which I mentioned. Our application form asks them to briefly describe what that impact has been and how they've been working towards overcoming that impact. And then they have to be located in the counties, 25 counties in the Panhandle region, there's 15 counties in the SPAG region, and then there's 17 counties in the Permian Basin, as I mentioned, all red on your screen. We were given a lot of flexibility to design CORE, and we intentionally set out to make it simple for small businesses and all-encompassing. Our eligible uses of funds are very simple: working capital and inventory. Working capital has a very broad definition. That could be anything the small business has in terms of overhead operations, rent, utilities, payroll. Inventory is also important. We all know a lot of small businesses had inventory disruptions during the pandemic. So any inventory or raw material necessary for operations is eligible for our CORE program. We also have a short list of ineligible uses. So essentially, we cannot do speculative activities with CORE. We cannot finance any projects located outside of our approved counties, but there are quite a number of them. We cannot do projects that assist in the relocation of jobs to another labor market. For instance, if a small business closed down in Houston and wanted to reopen in Lubbock, we could not use CORE funds because those jobs are relocating to a different labor market. We can't purchase or finance equity in private businesses or subsidize interest payments. And as I mentioned before, CORE is not for startups or new businesses. It's for existing businesses trying to seek relief from the impacts of the pandemic. Our lending criteria is also very simple. Every loan has a fixed interest rate of 2.44%. We have a maximum term of 10 years, although we ask each applicant in the application what term they specifically want, so they can have a shorter term. We had anticipated very simple round numbers in terms of loan amounts, 25, 50, 75, but our application has a blank box for the small business borrower to include any specific number that they are seeking. Loans exceeding $100,000 do require collateral assignment. So if you have a large loan that's over $100,000, we need to discuss what those options are. Generally speaking, commercial real estate, equipment, simple collateral assignments are ideal. The maximum loan we can do with CORE is $250,000. Immediately upon funding, which is all done internally, so the turnaround process is very quick, there's a 6-month moratorium on principal payments. So initially during the closing process, we take an ACH form from the borrower and we only draft interest payments for 6 months. After that period, their regular P&I payments begin. Also good news for SPAG CORE, there is no prepayment penalty. We actually really want all of our small businesses to get back on their feet and be able to pay off their loans if they choose to do so. So if a small business is ready to prepay, there's no penalty for doing so. So what are our goals with the creation of SPAG CORE? And already we've been able to lend in all 3 regions, and I hope that we're actually meeting these. We're really looking for financial relief to businesses and industries impacted by COVID-19. I mentioned before, that's going to be different for every single business. The impact on one restaurant that was able to do curbside quickly may look different to a restaurant in a rural community. So each individual business is asked to specify how the pandemic impacted their business operations. We're hoping to gather information on job retention. So SPAG CORE does not require any level of retention or job creation, but we do ask for that information on the application form so that we can collect it and have a good idea of the impact. And then most importantly, sustainability of business operations. We're looking for businesses that before the pandemic had good, stable operations and then were interrupted. And we're hoping to get them back on the right track to sustain their operations. The application process for SPAG CORE is very simple. We have a 2-page application form. It's available on our website, which I'll share in just a second. We require 2 years of business tax returns, the most recent. If you've already filled out 2020, even better. We also need interim financial statements. That's a balance sheet and profit and loss for the business within the last 90 days. Important to note, if a small business is a sole proprietorship, and a lot are, we will need a balance sheet for each of the personal tax returns that we collect. That's not always a norm. So if a small business has issues with that, we have a very simple spreadsheet that we've created that can help them produce those balance sheets, and we'll be happy to share that. And lastly, we require a personal financial statement for each owner over 20%. What's best about SPAG CORE is the application process. It is very simple. Any question, any document, the complete application, everything goes to one email box, and that's on your screen there, spagcore@spag.org. It's a simple email box. One of us is manning it at all times, so we're able to process that. That's for all 3 regions. So in any of those eligible counties, they can submit questions, application information, documents, etc. We also use this email box to correspond during the closing and funding process, so you always have the same contact throughout your CORE loan process. Lastly, I just want to reiterate that our website, www.caprock504.org, has the basic information about CORE as well as that application form. And then again, if you do have a small business borrower or you are one yourself, you're also invited to email the spagcore@spag.org email box. We can provide you a copy of the application, a sample of the balance sheet, answer questions, anything of that nature. I know that's a lot fast and furious, so if you have some questions about SPAG CORE, please put them in the chat box, and we'll tackle those at the end of the presentation. For now, I'm going to turn it over to Naomi to talk to us about the 504 program.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us again. For this portion of the webinar, I will be covering the SBA 504 fundamentals, as well as some of the programmatic updates related to the 504 refinance program. As many of you already know, the SBA 504 program was designed for the purchase of fixed assets. So meaning commercial real estate, the construction of commercial real estate, equipment and machinery at the low market rates. The mission of the program is tied to economic development, meaning that for every $75,000 that is borrowed, at least one job must be created or retained. But before I jump into the nuts and bolts of the SBA 504 program, let's go ahead and discuss some of the services that we provide here at Caprock. Like Kelly mentioned earlier, we are a certified development company that is regulated and certified by the U.S. Small Business Administration, also known as a CDC, to partner with lenders to do 504 projects. For those of you who are lenders on the call, we really appreciate the trust that you put in to Caprock to service your customers well. Our team is with our mutual borrower throughout the process from start to finish, meaning that we originate the loan, we package the loan to SBA, we close the loan, and then we service that note from 20 to 25 years. Our entire team is based in Lubbock, making us the only Lubbock-based CDC. Our back-end operations are not going to some other big city like Austin or Dallas. We are completely local and completely accessible to our West Texas borrowers. So let's jump in to see how the 504 program works. On this screen, you will see the typical 504 split that you hear of, which is the 50-40-10 structure, where 50% of the financing comes from the third-party lender, 40% comes from SBA, and then the 10% is the borrower's down payment requirement. It's important to keep in mind, however, that the down payment can range from 10% to 20%, depending on the age of the business and the type of assets that are being acquired. For example, if a business is less than 2 years old, they're going to be considered a startup. If a business is acquiring a special use facility, then that will also increase the down payment to 15%. And that would be the same for the startup as well. If the business is both a startup and acquiring a special use facility, that's when the down payment can be up to 20%. Moving on to the next slide, here's a really great example of a total project cost that we would have. A lot of lenders and borrowers ask us, hey, what is the difference between the permanent third-party lender financing and the interim financing? And it's really important to remember here, one of the key points is the fact that the SBA, number one, is not a bank and it does not operate like a bank. That's why this public-private partnership is so crucial. On the bottom part of the screen, you will see an example. If our total project cost is $710,000, once we receive SBA authorization, at that point, the third-party lender can release up to 90% of the financing, which in this case would be $639,000. It's important to remember that this interim third-party lender financing can be set up as one note or as two notes. It's completely up to the bank as to how they would like to structure the interim. It is interest only for the period of time that the construction is taking place, or the renovations are being complete, or simply to just acquire the building. Once the bond is sold on the bond market, at that point in time is where you see the permanent financing be set into place, and you will see this 50-40-10 split. So at the end of the day, the borrower will end up with two notes, one with their bank and one with the SBA. Timeline. We really like to be involved at the very front end of this process. It gives us the opportunity to not only meet with the borrower and the lender, but also to get a really good sense of what is the borrower's business plan look like, what are their objectives in using this financing, and it will also allow us to run any eligibility traps that we might see on the front end that we could catch. Once we establish who will be the main point of contact in terms of collecting documentation, so we're not bombarding the borrower with multiple emails, it could be, we could be the main point of contact, or it could be the lender who's the main point of contact. We will begin processing the loan. Once the loan is processed, we will present to our respective committees. If you're a lender, you would present to your loan committee. For us, we present the project to our Caprock board. Once we have committee approvals, it's at that point that we package the project to the SBA. And it's at this point that we really have no control over the turnaround time. However, we do like to say internally that we will work as fast or as slow as a borrower needs us to work. After the borrower receives SBA authorization, the next steps will be the interim phase, followed by the closing, followed by the funding. I do have a slide that goes into much more detail of the closing and funding process because it is a two-step process. So as you can see, there are multiple benefits for borrowers using the 504 program, like a lower down payment requirement, a long-term fixed interest rate. But it's important to emphasize the benefits that the 504 program offers our third-party lenders as well. So why keep your eggs in one basket, right? The lender, first of all, will have a 50% LTV and keep a first lien on the collateral. Number two, it could help the financial institution lower the concentration in terms of loans for a specific borrower, or lower their concentration in terms of the bank's portfolio. Last but not least, engaging in the 504 program or participating in 504 loans with us could allow your institution to earn CRA credits. And, you know, as always, unfortunately, government programs do sometimes get a bad rap, and there are some myths associated with our 504 program, like there's too much red tape, it's a slow process, it's burdensome paperwork, and it's the option of last resort. In terms of it being a slow process and too much red tape, our CapRock BFC will handle any sort of back and forth that goes between us and the SBA, so that worry or that concern is immediately eliminated. My favorite is that it's the option of last resort, because in reality, the 504 program can be an excellent tool to have your customers back, because who doesn't like a low down payment requirement and a fixed interest rate? I'm sure that if you offer this to your customers as a tool, they'll remember that you have their best interest in mind and their financial well-being for their business. On this next screen, you will see some of the most recent 504 programs that we've worked on. If you are local, you might recognize some local logos here. There are also several national franchises that we've also done in the past few months, like My Place, Domino's, Signs on the Go is a great local company. So we're very, very excited to have participated in these businesses' journey. Moving on to the 504 loan closing process and what that looks like. The beginning of the closing process starts with the borrower signing and reviewing the loan authorization. Once the borrower signs the loan authorization, it's at this point that the third-party lender can at any time release the interim financing. The interim financing can be up to 90% of the total project cost. And during this interim period, for the construction to take place, for the renovations to be complete, or the purchase of the asset to happen, we will stay in constant communication with borrower and the lender throughout. Number 4, it's highlighted in red because we really want to stress the fact that the loan closing and funding is a two-step process. We collect all the documentation that we need for funding or for closing, we close the loan, and about 45 days later, the bond is sold on the bond market. So it is a two-step process, and sometimes this is where our lenders and our borrowers do get a little lost. At the time that the bond is sold on the bond market, at that point in time, it's the interest rate is set. And for 25 years, for a 25-year term right now, we're looking at a 2.9% interest rate. For a 20-year term, we're looking at 2.8%. And for a 20-year term, we're looking at 2.6%. So these are very competitive below market rates. Moving on to the 504 programmatic updates for refi. This first section, the bolded area on your screen, applies to all the refinance options that we have with the 504. So the terms can be anywhere from 20 to 25 years. The borrower injection could be cash, land, equity, or a combination of both. And then the structure could be a 50-40-10, most likely with a refi, because our borrowers will already have a certain amount of equity in the real estate. Our down payment injection is usually a little bit higher. So this allows us to have a little bit more leverage where we can go maybe even 50-50 with third-party lender. First, I'll start off with the refinance without expansion. One of the rules that changed that we were really happy to see is that debt must be at least 6 months or older. It used to be that it had to be at least 2 years old. So this is definitely changing that rule there. The refinance of existing eligible debt has to have been used for 85% of eligible 504 expenses. So 85% of the original notes must have been used for the purchase of fixed assets, a building, machinery and equipment, things of that nature. There is no longer a cap for CDCs to engage in a particular amount of refi activity. We used to be capped at a 50% of our prior year's loan volume. At this point, we are allowed to engage in any amount of refi activity that we would like, as long as the borrower meets the eligibility criteria. Deferred payments during 2020 are allowed, as long as they've happened within the last 12 months and that we can prove that those deferments were directly related to the COVID-19 pandemic. The next one is refinance with cash out. Again, the debt must be at least 6 months old. The refinance of eligible debt must have been used for fixed assets, essentially. And the cash out can be used for any eligible business expenses. The definition of eligible business expenses was expanded by the SBA in the last couple months, so it can be used for working capital, payroll, utilities, things of that nature. It's not restricted to a specific definition anymore. And we are very happy to announce that we can finally refi a 504 with another 504, and we can even refinance some eligible 780 debt as well. Moving on to refinance with expansion. I want to preface this by saying that some of these rules may be revised by June 30th of this year. So please keep an eye out for our e-letter, any sort of correspondence, social media that we put out in terms of the changes regarding refinance with expansion. But as of now, all debt must be at least 2 years old. Deferred payments within the last 12 months must be made whole. So essentially the deferments must be caught up, wiped out from the loan history. But please keep in mind, these rules are about to change, and we will definitely be sending out correspondence regarding these changes. All right, and some final programmatic general updates. The SBA loan authorization processing time continues to be longer than normal, unfortunately. A lot of this has been caused by the COVID relief financing that was launched by the SBA in the last 12 months, like PPP, EIDL, things of that nature. And the federal government continues to work from home. So two pieces of legislation that have really impacted borrowers in terms of subsidy payments, things of that nature. At this point, we are not guaranteeing any subsidy payments to any of our incoming borrowers or anyone that is funded, just because there's a lot of uncertainty in terms of whether or not all of these funds have been exhausted. Oh, and I'm so sorry, I did skip number 2. We will be considering any outstanding balances for PPP or EIDL in our credit analysis. It is prudent lending. It is one of the underwriting guidelines that SBA has been very strict about. SBA third-party lender fees have been eliminated until September 30th of this year. There is a 50 basis points that have to be paid on behalf of the third-party lender to participate in the 504 program, and this is now being paid on behalf of the federal government until September. Finally, electronic signatures are allowed through July 30th. Not on all the forms, but on the majority of all of our forms, electronic signatures will be accepted. I am on the board for national development companies, and I am actively advocating for some of these modernization efforts to be permanently implemented into our program. So fingers crossed that we get to keep electronic signatures, because it does make our life a lot easier. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Kelly.
Awesome. I just want to say really quickly, we appreciate everyone's time this morning. I know we're all tired of webinars, so I would like to offer, if your loan officers, your lending team would like to have a one-on-one training, we're happy to put something together specifically to the needs of your bank or small business group and put that on in person for you all. So please reach out to one of us and let us know if that would be of interest for you. A lot of times there's quite a bit of detail that we can get into on 504, and so we love to have that back and forth with our lenders at any point. I will say we've unpacked a lot in a very short amount of time, but we want to be courteous of all the busy schedules you all have. So with that, we'll take a few questions from the chat box.
At what point in the process are financials expected?
That's a great question. Let me answer for CORE really quickly, and I'll let Naomi handle 504. For the SPAG CORE program, which again is our COVID relief program, we only collect financial statements during the application phase. So at the very beginning, we ask for 2 years of tax returns, interim financial statements, and personal financial statements. And that's it for CORE. Again, that's a temporary COVID relief program, so it has a little bit less restrictions.
On the 504 side of things, we will be collecting financials throughout the entire process. We will have to collect financials during the origination phase. We will have to collect financials during the closing. And then after a loan is funded, we will be corresponding with the borrower on an annual basis for servicing and collecting annual tax returns from then on.
Was this webinar recorded, and can we get it emailed to us?
That is also a great question. Yes, we recorded this webinar. A couple of things. We have been progressing quite a bit with CapRock over the last few months and years with our social media and our different presences. We have a couple of options here. If you would like a copy of the recording, you can email one of us and get that. It will be going up on all of our social media and be available online in the next couple of weeks. And then additionally, for a lot of you that registered for this training, we are actually sending out flash drives with the information along with some goodies just to share and remind you of the programs that we have. So look for that over the next week or so.
What are the current rates?
Currently for the 504, for a 20-year term, you're looking at 2.93. For a 20-year term, you'd be looking at 2.84%, and on a 10-year, that would be 2.623%.
Right. The SBA releases their rates, every single month, and we send that out in our e-letter. So if you aren't signed up, like Naomi mentioned earlier, please do. For CORE, those rates are set; they never change. Every loan is locked in at 2.44%.
And one final question. Can 504 be used to finance working capital?
No, it is not allowed to finance working capital. However, we do have programs that allow for that, like the SPAG CORE. That would be one of the eligible uses of funds, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, once again, we just want to say thank you to everybody for taking some time out of your morning to spend it with us and get this information. If you have interested borrowers, questions, we've provided you our contact information. We look forward to working with several of you, hopefully, on new projects that are coming up. And if you have questions in the future, please just let us know. Thanks so much.
Thank you.